What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to another Resplendent review, and this is going to be my in-depth analysis and review of Resplendent Seliph, and I'll be going over the best builds that you can run on him for different game modes. At the end, I'll also have a bonus segment. So as you all know, I'm a big Seliph fan and I do have Plus and Seliph on both of my accounts. I primarily use him a lot with my free-to-play account, and he's the reason why I've been able to get a lot of thrones and ether raids in Vault of Heaven, and I also have him with the highest favor of any of my units in Summoner Duels, and I've also used him a lot in ether raids defense when he was really popular. So I still pretty much use him daily, so I can just give you an insight of how you can use Seliph to the best of his abilities and where he can really shine. Now, even though I'm a big Seliph fan, I still want to stay unbiased and still point out his shortcomings. So Seliph is a Gen 1 Sword Infantry unit, and he has actually got two weapons. Tyrfing is his own weapon, and you can get Divine Tyrfing by spending extra Divine Dues to get this weapon, and he essentially gets this from his father Sigurd. And Divine Tyrfing is pretty much the thing which you're going to be seeing on Seliph in the modern times. Tyrfing used to be a weapon that was really popular back in the Ether Raid days, where the Miracle Refine was really helpful for making him into a bulky frontliner. We didn't really have the far save or near save units back then, and even Bolt Tower was not really all that high level. As Bolt Tower's level increased, his Tyrfing Refine kind of fell off in that sense. So the Tyrfing Refine is really straightforward. It's one of the older ones, so he just has attack defense bond built into it, and if he's above 50% HP, then he can get the miracle effect. So of course the problem arises that whenever he faces something like a Bolt Tower in Ether Raid's defense, he can fall below that 50% HP, and then he just doesn't have a miracle. Divine Tyrfing comes in, completely changing up the game of Seliph and makes him into a really nice merge project option, because this weapon is just so good by giving him plus 10 attack and defense in both phases, giving him an auto follow-up, and it also gives him 50% damage reduction on foe's first magic attack. So not only this weapon tries to give him the auto follow-up, makes him into a nice mixed phase unit, but also gives him nice mixed bulk by giving him plus 10 defense and also the damage reduction against the magical units. And as of right now, magical units don't really have a way of piercing through the damage reduction like lethality or deadeye for the physical weapons. So Divine Tyrfing makes him into a really solid red infantry unit who can be merged up in the 3-star 4-star pool. Of course, there is a ton of competition when it comes to sword infantry units, especially if you go into the premium pool, but if you really like Seliph, then he's still a pretty decent unit overall. He has definitely fallen off a bit in terms of competitive play, but still overall he is a solid unit with the Divine Tyrfing weapon refine. Seliph pretty much ends up being a unit who can use all of his stats, so he's the type of unit you invest into with max investment with Dragon Flowers merges, because he really appreciates every single stat that he can get, and that's why Resplendent stats are a huge boon for his mixed phase playstyle. So he can be compared to another sword infantry unit present in the 3-star 4-star pool, which I also think is a really good unit and also quite popular, and that is Chrom with the Seal Falchion weapon refine. So he also has a Resplendent version, and as you can see, the stats of these two units are really similar. Seliph of course has much better resistance, but both of these units have their own pros and cons. So Chrom here gets plus 10 speed, gets a lot more speed out of his weapon than, Seliph, and he also has the follow-up negation built into this weapon. So for getting more bulky, he can basically run damage reduction builds at max investment that can scale off his speed, and Seliph on the other hand pretty much tries to focus by running null follow-up in his slot while trying to be bulky with that damage reduction that he gets only against the magical opponents, and then getting the extra bulk from Divine Tyrfing, and not to mention the auto follow-up, which Chrom lacks. So against a lot of the very fast units, Chrom is not going to be able to auto follow-up, but Seliph can, as long as they're not running null follow-up. Chrom being able to stack up a lot of speed along with the follow-up negation can make him really bulky in many matchups, and these units can be seen in Summoner Duels, Book 3 and prior metagame, where they are going to be used quite a bit because these are really popular merge projects overall. And now let's move on to the builds. So like I said, you want to invest as much as you can on Seliph. This can definitely work out at lower investment, but again, he does appreciate any kind of extra stats. The first build is the standard Seliph build. If you're building up Seliph at plus and merge, then this is pretty much the build that you're going to be seeing on any kind of Seliph ever. And this is an overall really solid build that can function in mixed phase and goes well with his playstyle. So this encounter does allow him to use his magical damage reduction with Divine Tyrfing productively, and null follow-up in my opinion is pretty much his best lobby skill. Lull attack defense is also an option, but null follow-up is just way better. And damage reduction skills are a thing in slot B as well, but Seliph doesn't really get extra speed out of his weapon, so that's why null follow-up by the process of elimination just ends up being the best skill for him, and that also does a lot for him in combat. Let me explain why it's a really good skill. So first of all, Seliph has got an auto follow-up in his weapon, and if you combine it with null follow-up, then even against very fast opponents who have got the impact effect, for example a Resplendent Seliph with Blazing Durandal who has got the impact effect in his weapon, Seliph is able to easily deal with him despite the fact that Seliph is faster and also has a impact effect. So null follow-up with the auto follow-up is really good. And usually a lot of auto follow-up mages are going to be a problematic thing for Seliph because he only gets the damage reduction on his first hit. So that's why denying the follow-up attacks of the enemies, especially the magical enemies who have auto follow-ups, is really good with the null follow-up skill. And there are just so many other slower units that he can use null follow-up against and be pretty good. And again, having more speed on him can be nice with the Sacred Seal. A lot of Selifs who use him in Vault of Heaven and stuff like that at top level do like to stack up the speed for the reason that if he can have enough speed, then he can also close the gap between the speed-based damage reduction skills, and he can also work defensively with that if you're able to stop the natural follow-up attacks of some of the enemies who have not the highest speed. So that is the standard Seliph build. You should definitely be running this if you're building up Seliph, and he can also be used in Arena. Now in Arena, he's not going to be able to run Distant Counter, he has to run R-Dual Infantry 4, but overall he ends up being a pretty solid melee tank with this kind of weapon, giving him really high defense, and then the auto follow-up, and then null follow-up also helping you. And with his extremely high HP, he can easily run Panic Ploy to provide that support to your team, and he's going to be able to Panic Ploy pretty much most of the opponents. You can also run Steady Breath and retaliate back with Ruptured Sky, which can be really helpful in many matchups. You can also use him as a melee tank instead of running Distant Counter, and something like this could be run in Summoner Duels. I've actually seen a couple of Selifs actually do this in combination with a far-safe tank like Legendary Tiki and Brave Hector, so he can take care of the melee matchups, and because of the null follow-up, he can also deny auto follow-ups of units like Legendary Ephraim, who are really popular in the Book 3 and prior metagame. So attack defense unity does function in both phases just like his weapon, and he can take care of the debuffs with that. And because of his high HP, he can definitely make use of Infantry Pulse and Pulse Down like a threat. I usually like to Pulse Down my Brave Alm, for example, with my Seliph and Summoner Duels, so this could be done. And if you want to use him at absolute max investment, then Distant Stance from Legendary Fae does provide him with extra resistance. Giant Drive Speed is going to be providing you with more speed, and Speed Ascended Asset is definitely something I would recommend. Even though he is not the fastest, like I explained before, having any kind of extra speed can be really helpful to just stack it up with Giant Drive Speed and Attack Speed Solo Sacred Seal, and he ends up at like 49 speed, which is pretty nice for denying the doubles and then making productive use of null follow-up. And with the null follow-up and his auto follow-up, it pretty much becomes a speed check against the other null follow-up units, so that's why stacking up speed can definitely help you at max investment. And if you want to use him in Aetherite's offense, then this build is definitely going to be working out really well. I still use this build, and I've been using Seliph in Aetherite's offense even before he got his Divine Tyrfing weapon refine, because like he was a really nice magic check, and even back in the days of Infantry Pulse teams and pre-charge specials, he was able to easily take on stuff like Ophelia's, Reinhardt's, and all of that. But unfortunately, after the release of Note, he is definitely going to be struggling at times in solo tanking. Solo tanking in general is a really hard task in Vault of Heaven as of right now in the metagame, because the threats are just so powerful and they can snipe your units and stuff like that. You do not have a lot of space at times with Note and our Pathfinder. That solo tanking often becomes a bit difficult, but still it's workable, and I still use him from time to time, even right now in the current metagame in Aetherite's offense. But still you need to run some kind of units who can take care of Note or maybe Sniper. So something like a Yuri who can just snipe Note, or a unit with Kanto like Brave Erika who can snipe Note, is going to be really helpful to just clear the path for Seliph to tank the remaining units. And he can most of the time tank a lot of the physical threats and the magical threats because of his really nice mixed bulk. So this is definitely a tried and tested build, and you definitely want to have some kind of healing with this kind of tanking build. And I've found Soul to be pretty useful. Back then I used to run him with Noontime and Brave Lucina, but nowadays I just use him without Brave Lucina and just running Soul. The next build might not be the best, but it's still a really interesting option that can focus on maximizing his bulk and his tanking potential. So because he gets the damage reduction on foe's first magical hit, you can use Deflect Magic Sacred Seal, and if he gets doubled, then he can pretty much reduce the damage by 80%, and because of Bracing Stance's guard effect, he can also stop these special charges and pretty much have a bonfire ready so that he can nuke. So this build does have its shortcomings by not being able to run distant counter and not being mixed phase, because you do need to get the guard effect here, but still it could be an interesting option if you're trying to just run a different kind of build aside from the standard build that Seliph usually runs. And he can also be used in Aether Raid's offense as a Gale Force unit. I've definitely been thinking of using my Seliph in my Gale Force teams, and because of his extremely high HP, you can pretty much Infantry pulse down any kind of other Gale Force infantry unit, even like Sylvia's with extremely high HP. So I do like that. So if you want to use him in a Gale Force team, and if you really do not like using him with tanking, so this could be a way of repurposing him for the usage in Aether Raids. And Quicken Pulse can pretty much make him have 4-turn Gale Force so that he can essentially trigger Gale Force even against some kind of ranged opponent. And then finally, his high HP does lend really well to the usage in Pawns of Loki, where he can have really high HP to abuse sudden panic and also contribute to your scoring, while also being a pretty solid unit. I myself use my own Seliph, and many of my friends use my Seliph in Pawns of Loki, so this is something you could do again to make use of his HP stat. Now as you've seen, I've mostly gone over the builds which have got Divine Tyrfing, and you will see no build here with the normal Tyrfing, and that's going to be the case with most of these Seliph users who use him a lot, because the normal Tyrfing, while it does have Miracle, it's kind of gimmicky and it's not always going to be helping you in combat where you need the mixed phase support. Like in Summoner duels, you need to have the mixed phase so that you can go in on the player phase and kill an opponent using his auto follow-up. But unfortunately, the normal Tyrfing Refine doesn't really do that. His attack defense bond weapon refine is definitely not as convenient as this Divine Tyrfing weapon refine, which has a lot more lenient condition and can even give him extra attack and defense compared to that. And unfortunately, the main usage of Tyrfing weapon refine was in Aether Raid's defense when the Infantry Pulse teams were at their peak, so Seliph could just be a bulky frontliner. But like I said, with the Bull Tower, it kind of fell off, and even now, like a sword infantry unit like Seliph on the front line is not going to be the most threatening unit. We do have stuff like save units which you can definitely utilize to protect your entire team. Seliph compared to that is not going to be able to protect your entire team because he doesn't have the save skill, and something like the attack defense unity build could also be used in Aether Raid's offense just for the melee tanking role, combining with a far save tank. But at that point, you might as well use Arden, who pretty much does the same thing but better with his weapon and also having the save skill. So that's why I've not really mentioned the Tyrfing. I've used the normal Tyrfing Refine a lot as a Seliph enthusiast, and pretty much most of the time it is going to be paling in comparison to Divine Tyrfing. If you run the Tyrfing Weapon Refine, you again have to depend on quick riposte to get the auto follow-ups. You pretty much don't get any kind of player phase because there's no auto follow-up, and Miracle is pretty much the only thing that weapon provides to him, whereas Divine Tyrfing not only gives him damage reduction, auto follow-up, mixed phase usage, but also extra attack and defense, and it's all really good. So let us go on with his theory crafting. So Divine Tyrfing, like I said, I already praised it enough. So Tyrfing Weapon Refine, I wish if it was modern, it would have this kind of change. So having -1 special cooldown in Tyrfing would be really good because he mainly used Vengeance back then when Tyrfing was really popular on him on the Aether Raid's defense team. So having Vengeance as a 2-turn special or Bonfire as a 2-turn special would be really good. And I would just have his Miracle condition with 25% HP instead of having 50% HP so that he can again function well in Aether Raid's defense and at least have more lenient condition. And then I would definitely give him extra attack and defense, and even the attack and defense debuff with his Weapon Refine, and also giving the guard effect to him. So this can make him truly really bulky, and it gives him something different than Divine Tyrfing. The guard effect is especially really good, so you can run distant counter and slotty and still enjoy the guard effect. But unfortunately, again, this kind of Tyrfing doesn't really give him the auto follow-up, which still the Divine Tyrfing gives. So let me know what you think about my theory craft regarding this Tyrfing re-refine. I tried to make it a bit different than the Divine Tyrfing, so let me know, and I hope you all enjoyed my Resplendent Seliph review. I was definitely really passionate about this video and his Resplendent version, so make sure to share this video with your friends who are big Seliph fans or want to build him up. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like and a comment, helps me tremendously. And if you really enjoyed, you could always support me directly by using Super Thanks or by becoming a YouTube member. And for more Resplendent analysis videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because I wish YouTube also had the damage reduction for their sub boxes just like Divine Tyrfing. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.